Verses 7-14a. To what he had said in the former paragraph, the apostle here raises an objection, which he answers very fully. What shall we say then? Is the law sin? When he had been speaking of the dominion of sin, he had said so much of the influence of the law as a covenant upon that dominion that it might easily be misinterpreted as a reflection upon the law, to prevent which he shows from his own experience the great excellency and usefulness of the law, not as a covenant, but as a guide, and further discovers how sin took occasion by the commandment. Observe in particular the great excellency of the law in itself. Far be it from Paul to reflect upon the law, no, he speaks honorably of it. It is holy, just, and good, v. 12. The law in general is so, and every particular commandment is so. Laws are as the lawmakers are. God, the great lawgiver, is holy, just, and good, therefore his law must needs be so. The matter of it is holy, it commands holiness, encourages holiness, it is holy, for it is agreeable to the holy will of God, the original of holiness. It is just, for it is consonant to the rules of equity and right reason, the ways of the Lord are right. It is good in the design of it, it was given for the good of mankind, for the conservation of peace and order in the world. It makes the observers of it good, the intention of it was to better and reform mankind. Wherever there is true grace there is an assent to this, that the law is holy, just, and good. The law is spiritual, v. 14, not only in regard to the effect of it, as it is a means of making us spiritual, but in regard to the extent of it, it reaches our spirits, it lays a restraint upon, and gives a direction to, the motions of the inward man, it is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart, it forbids spiritual wickedness, heart murder, and heart adultery. It commands spiritual service, requires the heart, obliges us to worship God in the Spirit. It is a spiritual law, for it is given by God, who is a spirit and the Father of spirits. It is given to man, whose principal part is spiritual, the soul is the best part, and the leading part of the man, and therefore the law to the man must needs be a law to the soul. Herein the law of God is above all other laws, that it is a spiritual law. Other laws may forbid compassing and imagining, etc., which are treason in the heart, but cannot take cognizance thereof, unless there be some overt act, but the law of God takes notice of the iniquity regarded in the heart, though it go no further. Wash thy heart from wickedness, Jah 4:14. We know this, wherever there is true grace there is an experimental knowledge of the spirituality of the law of God. The great advantage that he had found by the law. 1. It was discovering, I had not known sin but by the law, v. 7. As that which is straight discovers that which is crooked, as the looking glass shows us our natural face with all its spots and deformities, so there is no way of coming to that knowledge of sin which is necessary to repentance, and consequently to peace and pardon, but by comparing our hearts and lives with the law. Particularly he came to the knowledge of the sinfulness of lust by the law of the 10th commandment. By lust he means sin dwelling in us, sin in its first motions and workings, the corrupt principle. This he came to know when the law said, Thou shalt not covet. The law spoke in other language than the scribes and Pharisees made it to speak in, it spoke in the spiritual sense and meaning of it. By this he knew that lust was sin and a very sinful sin, that those motions and desires of the heart towards sin which never came into act were sinful, exceedingly sinful. Paul had a very quick and piercing judgment, all the advantages and improvements of education, and yet never attained the right knowledge of indwelling sin till the Spirit by the law made it known to him. There is nothing about which the natural man is more blind than about original corruption, concerning which the understanding is altogether in the dark till the Spirit by the law reveal it, and make it known. Thus the law is a schoolmaster, to bring us to Christ, opens and searches the wound, and so prepares it for healing. Thus sin by the commandment does appear sin, v. 13, it appears in its own colors, appears to be what it is, and you cannot call it by a worse name than its own. Thus by the commandment it becomes exceedingly sinful, that is, it appears to be so. We never see the desperate venom or malignity there is in sin, till we come to compare it with the law, and the spiritual nature of the law, and then we see it to be an evil and a bitter thing. It was humbling. v9 I was alive. He thought himself in a very good condition, he was alive in his own opinion and apprehension, very secure and confident of the goodness of his state. Thus he was once, pote in times past, when he was a Pharisee, for it was the common temper of that generation of men that they had a very good conceit of themselves, and Paul was then like the rest of them, and the reason was he was then without the law. Though brought up at the feet of Gamaliel, a doctor of the law, though himself a great student in the law, a strict observer of it, and a zealous stickler for it, yet without the law. He had the letter of the law, but he had not the spiritual meaning of it, the shell, but not the kernel. He had the law in his hand and in his head, but he had it not in his heart, the notion of it, but not the power of it. There are a great many who are spiritually dead in sin, that yet are alive in their own opinion of themselves, and it is their strangeness to the law that is the cause of the mistake. But when the commandment came in the power of it, not to his eyes only, but to his heart, sin revived, as the dust in a room rises, that is, appears, when the sunshine is let into it. Paul then saw that in sin which he had never seen before, he then saw sin in its causes, the bitter root, the corrupt bias, the bent to backslide sin in its colors, deforming, defiling, breaking a righteous law, affronting an awful majesty, profaning a sovereign crown by casting it to the ground, sin in its consequences, sin with death at the heels of it, sin and the curse entailed upon it. Thus sin revived, and then I died, I lost that good opinion which I had had of myself, and came to be of another mind. Sin revived, and I died, that is, the spirit, but the commandment, convinced me that I was in a state of sin, and in a state of death because of sin. Of this excellent use is the law, it is a lamp and a light, it converts the soul, opens the eyes, prepares the way of the Lord in the desert, rends the rocks, levels the mountains, makes ready a people prepared for the Lord. The ill use that his corrupt nature made of the law notwithstanding. Sin, taking occasion by the commandment, wrought in me all manner of concupiscence, v8. Observe, Paul had in him all manner of concupiscence, though one of the best unregenerate men that ever was, as touching the righteousness of the law, blameless, and yet sensible of all manner of concupiscence. And it was sin that wrought it, indwelling sin, his corrupt nature, he speaks of a sin that did work sin, and it took occasion by the commandment. The corrupt nature would not have swelled and raged so much if it had not been for the restraints of the law, as the peccant humors in the body are raised, and more inflamed, by a purge that is not strong enough to carry them off. It is incident to corrupt nature, invetetum niti, to lean towards what is forbidden. Ever since Adam ate forbidden fruit, we have all been fond of forbidden paths. The diseased appetite is carried out most strongly towards that which is hurtful and prohibited. Without the law sin was dead, as a snake in winter, which the sunbeams of the law quicken and irritate. It deceived men. Sin puts a cheat upon the sinner, and it is a fatal cheat, v11. By it, by the commandment, slew me. There being in the law no such express threatening against sinful lustings, sin, that is, his one corrupt nature, took occasion thence to promise him impunity, and to say, as the serpent to our first parents, you shall not surely die. Thus it deceived and slew him. It wrought death in me by that which is good, v13. That which works concupiscence works death, for sin bringeth forth death. Nothing so good but a corrupt and vicious nature will pervert it, and make it an occasion of ins. No flower so sweet by sin will such poison out of it. Now in this sin appears sin. The worst thing that sin does, and most like itself, is the perverting of the law, and taking occasion from it to be so much the more malignant. Thus the commandment, which was ordained to life, was intended as a guide in the way to comfort and happiness, proved unto death, through the corruption of nature, v10. Many a precious soul splits upon the rock of salvation, and the same word which to some is an occasion of life unto life is to others an occasion of death unto death. The same sun that makes the garden of flowers more fragrant makes the dunghill more noisome, the same heat that softens wax hardens clay, and the same child was set for the fall and rising again of many in Israel. The way to prevent this mischief is to bow our souls to the commanding authority of the word and law of God, not striving against, but submitting to it.